Sometimes when I'm thinking about us, before we got lost and we parted, back to back we would carry on and we'd do anything for what we started. But this time we could break. I'm running dry, everything's the same. We'll try tonight, this time we're not safe and sound. Not safe and sound. Back we would carry on and we'd do anything for what we started. But this time we could break. I'm running dry, everything's the same. We'll try tonight, this time we're not safe and sound. Not safe and sound. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me?
Welcome everybody to the FPV News with me and howdy, ItsBlunty. How you doing?
How's it going? Good.
Good.
How's it going
Very
with you?
good. I'm very well, and very happy to be back here with you again to learn about everything that's new in FPV. And I say that because that's mostly what I just sit here and watch while you tell me what's going on, and then I'm the Ed McMahon of this show. I've realized that just now. You're the Johnny Carson.
I don't know those references because I'm 31. Yeah.
I feel
I thought
sad now.
for a second, I don't like you. You could have told me Ed McMahon had something to do with wrestling, and I would have believed you.
Who the fuck is Conan O'Brien's sidekick? Not Jimmy Kimmel. Who's Conan O'Brien? Andy Richter. I'm the Andy Richter, and you're the Conan O'Brien. Does that sit with you better?
Okay, that plays. Yeah.
Okay. Actually, I would rather be Conan O'Brien than Johnny Carson. No disrespect to the late great Johnny Carson. He was a talk show host. You don't know who Johnny Carson is?
I know of Johnny Carson, but
okay. Ed McMahon was his co-host.
Yeah, I don't know. I would not have passed the trivia. Who said it? Who is Ed McMahon?
Fair enough. I am old. But you know what's not old? It's the fresh news that we are bringing to people.
With wonderful new information for people.
That's right. And we are going to get you guys up to date on the stuff that's going on in FPV. But first, I'm just going to give thank you guys for being here. Every live stream, my center screen is put together with the chat, so I can see what you guys are saying, and I can see when you leave me super chats. News not so big for super chats usually. There you go. What can you do? And also the beautiful people in my Patreon, in my Discord here. Chris B, welcome back to the live streams. Glad to have you. Why am I watching two old guys talk about drones? One old guy and one youngster. One youngster.
Yeah, I just have a beard, but I'm 31. So
31-year-olds can grow full beards. It's no gray in your beard, though. Not yet.
Technically a millennial.
Oof. Well, I won't hold it against you. Do you want to tell the people? License to Drive is asking how young you are. Do you want to tell the people how old you are? Young you are?
Yeah, 31. In case anybody missed it.
And I am 47. Is that right?
Yeah.
1975?
I don't know.
It seems right. It's hard to even believe when I say it myself. But there you go.
Yeah.
Anyway. Holding my own. Still haven't finished Elden Ring 3 times.
Yeah.
So, maybe not holding my own.
Yeah.
All right, let's stop. Yeah, let's stop bullshitting. Let's get to the news, Blunty.
All right.
And let's just dive in. We're not going to do our favorite news items this week. We're just going to dive in. I'm changing it up. We're going to dive in, of course, in the beginning with public service announcements, little important tidbits that keep you out of trouble. And we have one this week.
Yes, we have one, and hopefully it will solve a lot of questions people have. I think it already has, and hopefully it will continue to do so. A lot of people are confused about the DJI firmware situation. We talked about last week a little bit about, hey, how you're not supposed to update this because there's a root hack out now, and that root hack is going to be blocked by certain things.
DJI is being their usual self. We can't hold it against them. You expect us, like the scorpion, the Aesop's fable of the scorpion, right? Of course I stung you. I'm a scorpion. What did you expect me to do? DJI is trying to lock out mostly with the FPV drone, right? They lock out the ability to... Go ahead.
The main thing they did was block the NFZ and other specific hacks where you could basically...
The devil hack?
Yeah, you could unlock, or the drone hacks, I believe, was the NFC as well, where you could basically pull off the NFC features so you could fly anywhere without having to unlock the NFC areas and stuff.
No fly zone.
And get past all those other issues. So the first thing they did was 0020, which came out a little while ago, and that was blocking those hacks, but it was there was a way to roll back. So anybody who was doing the hacks could just roll back with the same hack software.
To the older versions. Yeah.
Unfortunately, they released...
And hang on, before you go on to that, I just want to, because people might be thinking at this point, well, I don't have the FPV drone, so I don't care. But it also locked out the ability to do the video out, the DigiView. And there is a new hack that
I don't think
is that right
correct.
Or no? Is that not right?
No. As far as I know, DigiView has not been affected by any of this.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, because they would have had to update their fly. They would have had to change their app and the way they connect to the app.
If people don't have the FPV drone, should they care?
Yes,
a lot of people watching this don't.
Yeah, so if you have any interest in the root exploit, so using this root exploit that we talked about last week, basically that will eventually have likely a bunch of features, but currently only has just the ability to get into the root of the goggles and do a couple different things, but nothing in particular.
Okay.
Special right now, you could load Doom and you can change the binding, so you don't have to change binding between the FPV drone and the air units and stuff, but just minor things like that.
So just to recap the recap, and then I'll let you go with your awesome chart that you made. Yeah. If you have the DJI FPV drone and you want to do any of that unlock stuff, or if you don't have the DJI FPV drone and you want to take it, they've set things that might happen in the future is independent development of MSP DisplayPort, extending the 13-kilometer range. Really, we don't know, but with root access, nearly anything could be done. And if you want access to that, then there is a firmware that you don't want to flash.
Yes, correct. Yeah, and that is the 0015 firmware, which you can only get by going to the drone side. So you would have to purposely do this if you don't own the drone. You would have to go to the wrong side of the goggles and do an update to get this wrong update. But basically, this chart hopefully lays out for you some of the major concerns and answers a couple questions that people might have. There's some notes here answering a couple things about downgrading, but the big takeaway for you is if you're flying the DIY system, if you have an air unit, if you have a Vista, if you have V1 goggles, those can be updated to the latest version and there's no issues or changes or problems. If you've got V2 goggles and you're only using them for the drone, no matter what mode they're in, you can still do the power hack, you still do the FCC hack, you can still do DigiView, none of that has changed.
So the V1 goggles do not get the 0015 firmware that is the bad one. The one where
Correct.
it locks you out and you can't roll back.
Yes.
So the V2 goggles, however, if you are in DIY mode and you flash 0015, you will lose the ability to roll back to 606, and that is going to lock you out forever of the root exploit. But the
Correct.
1200 milliwatt and the FCC hack is still preserved.
Yep.
And if your goggles are in drone mode because you fly the DJI drone, there's another thing, which is where they force you to get the update, right? That's what I see down here.
Yeah, if you connect to the DJI Fly app, so you don't necessarily have to do this to fly your drone, but if you do connect to the Fly app and your phone is on the internet, it will tell you like, hey, you have to use this update, and it will trigger a thing in the goggles and in the system that will not let you fly until you get the update. There is a fix for that on iOS currently. They haven't patched it yet as far as we know. If you force close the app, go into airplane mode, and then open the app again, it will not have cached the version, and then it will get rid of that lock, and then you don't have to update.
There are folks in the chat who are just now hearing about the root exploit. It's a big freaking deal. It basically completely opens the firmware to developers who are just they're tearing it up right now and figuring out what they can do. And essentially anything you want from the firmware that DJI won't give us, in theory, the root exploit makes it possible for independent developers to get. So today there is no advantage to it. They haven't done anything yet, but they're steaming ahead.
The work all went to get all this working, make it protectable, make it flashable so that it doesn't brick your stuff, make it reversible, figure out all the hooks, like all the stuff that would make this a concern to actually work with for maybe a dev who doesn't want to brick their hardware. And now this is like a platform for people.
Yeah. So. Developers, says Mark Spatz. You mean hackers? Yeah, hackers in the best possible way. But the concern that I think that we don't have an answer to, Blunty, is like today, if you buy the V2 goggles, they come with the 606 firmware. Actually, maybe the 60, maybe even an earlier firmware, maybe the 600. I'm not sure.
The last guy I saw who just purchased goggles was 603.
603, there you go.
But I think it depends on which batch you get, because there might be some batches where people get the drone mode side still. We don't really know how that works. Presumably, if you buy a standalone set of goggles, you will hopefully get an 0603 set, which means they don't even have the drone mode on them yet, and you need to update them to 06.
Oh, right. The FPV drone mode is added in 606. One of the things that's confusing is that the goggles can be in two modes, DJI FPV drone mode and what you're calling DIY system mode, which is the Air Unit and the Vista that we all know and love. And for many people watching this, they never put the goggles in drone mode, and they never update that firmware, and they never touch it, which is frankly a good place to be. Anyway, thank you for putting this together, because there is a lot of confusion about what you can and can't get and which firmware versions are safe. And today, it seems like for DIY people, 606 is where you want to be. And if at some point in the future DJI starts shipping with 0015, then we'll have a problem, because then you won't be able to roll back, and the root will be locked out.
Back, and the root will be locked out. That's correct. The other thing just to note is if you do have the FPV drone, I've got on here the yellow spots, and that just means there are places you can roll back both the goggles and the drone. The goggles can actually be rolled back very simply. We don't know how long this will last for, but if you just switch the goggles back over to DIY mode and you flash them, 0606 is available, and we'll roll the whole goggle back to 0606.
Oh, so the FPV mode is like, no, you can't flash back from 020, but if you put it in DIY mode, they're like, yeah, whatever, we don't care.
It will let you.
Interesting.
But if you go to 0015, then that's not an option. And then on the Drone Hacks has a free download. It's kind of, you got to go in there and look at the downloads. The Drone Hacks website has a free download where you can go download a program, and that will let you backport your firmware to the 0000, which is the open version of the drone. So.
All right. Mr. Fowl in the Discord says, I'm so excited to be able to play Elden Ring on my DJI goggles.
Don't think so. But.
Not today. All right. Well, Lenny, thanks for putting that together. Very excited. Of course, guys, as new exploits come out, as this root hack actually produces fruit, then we will be covering it here on the news. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss those. And if you didn't know about the root hack, it's because you didn't watch last week's news. So make sure you're subscribed.
also true. Also, just so you guys know, in the corner I've got version 1 and the date, so keep an eye out. I'll probably be doing new versions when inevitably there are new versions for the goggles.
Yeah, because DJI isn't going to take this lying down. They're going to keep changing things.
Probably not, yeah.
Well, we got one more piece of DJI-related news. I don't know how to use my titles. There we go. There's been another leak from a fairly reputable leaker about the DJI Mini. What is the DJI Mini? What's going on here, Blunty?
Well, so it's a little bit confusing. We're not 100% sure. There's two rumors going on. One is that right here we've got a CETA saying if DJI made their own mini FPV drone with built-in prop guards, which he's shown a little bit before in teasers and stuff as what he thought it might look like, but the only concrete thing we really have is him saying this now, and this is from today. So he at least has some inkling that it might still be coming. However, a lot of people are saying maybe this could also be the Mavic Mini 3, and the Mini 3 will end up being like a multi-product. However, there was another, I don't know, some people could say leak, but this is a guy who does some of the drone stuff as well. He's not a good as source, so we didn't talk about it then, or we didn't put as much light on it. But here he lists the Mini 3 and the FPV Mini separately, and the Mini 3 would be coming out around this month or next month, and the FPV Mini would be around July. So we're not sure what'll happen, but it is possible there will be some. I would bet my money on one of DJI's drones coming out, either that Mini 3 or some specific DJI FPV Mini drone having an FPV mode. For people who don't know, in the goggles, there is the ability for the Air 2S to connect to the goggles, and that's still left in the firmware. When they found out where they were digging around in there. So that was definitely being tested.
Because right now, only the DJI FPV drone works with the DJI FPV goggles, and of course the DIY stuff, the Air Unit and the Vista would. But from DJI's perspective, only having one off-the-shelf drone that works with the goggles certainly could be seen as a downside. There was a promise, a rumor, like you said, that the Air would support them, but I think it didn't pan out, did it?
Yeah, they were clearly testing it in the lab, like they were doing the work, the firmware was being worked on, but it was never obviously pushed as a full update for people. So that exists inside the code. So presumably that would mean that the Mini 3 is probably going to, it seems like it's probably going to get it. So.
Well, if you fly DJI drones and have the goggles, that'll be nice to be able to use them with more stuff.
Also, no word on full acro or not. That's not something that has been data mined or figured out yet. So
yeah. Well, even the DJI FPV drone's full acro mode is, yes, it is acro, but it is not.
Junus confirms that it's still in the firmware, and you can activate that Air 2S mode with the root hack.
So the root hack, you could bind your Air 2S to your DJI FPV goggles.
It's possible. I'm not sure if anybody's gone through the whole process, but I think they know that is activatable. So
this is exciting. It's exciting because one of the main reasons that people stay away from DJI is the way that DJI locks down their ecosystem. And if this root hack stays alive and DJI doesn't find some way to prevent it from working, then you could have all the sort of good parts of DJI's hardware and firmware without all the bad stuff that you're it's control. Oh my God. Yeah. Are they digging through it looking for code that calls up home to China or tells them, your personal information? Are they looking for that stuff?
Sure. I think that's pretty well known, though, because they've monitored all the communication that happens when you connect it to a system.
Well, sure. We know, they send some information.
Yeah, that's the only place it dumps, right? It is in there, so.
All right. All righty. Well, enough about DJI. Let's stop. You know what? Let's stop talking about a company that is controversial and that some people love and some people hate. And instead, let's switch over and talk about TBS.
Yeah. All right. So everybody's been waiting for the Tango 2 and the Mambo to get the release of EdgeTX. It was planned for 2.6, which was in December. And then it was in Edge 2.7, which was in March. And unfortunately, if you scroll down to the bottom there, the milestone has now been pushed to 2.8.
Okay.
From 2.7. So 2.8 will be, let's see, like the April, May, June, so late June, early July release, I believe is how that works.
Yeah, so this is, for those who aren't familiar with GitHub, I mean, this is where they track the development of EdgeTX, and one of the things they've got is milestones for each of the development goals. And EdgeTX 2.7 is coming soon. It's not out yet. Has it released? I mean, they released so fast, I might have missed it.
No, it's not out yet, but it'll be out pretty soon, I believe. So.
And there was hope that support for the TBS Mambo and Tango 2 would be in 2.7, and now officially this is the word from the EdgeTX developers that it won't. And I mean, TBS has mentioned that one of their developers is based in Odessa, which is in Ukraine, and is so that, like, one of the things they seem to be implying is that, sorry guys, we're just not able to do this development. Although, as we discussed before the live stream, their developers have a lot on their hands right now, don't they?
Yeah, I think with the issues with Agent X they're working on to try to clean up Agent X and to get that working again. I mean, it seems like that's the goal anyway, because most people are using the Agent M currently, because there are issues with multi-flashing and breaking radios, soft breaking radios and stuff. And then there's issues with a lot of their firmwares. 613 and 614 had a manual binding bug. So if you updated to 613 or 614, even if you update off of it, I believe, it automatically broke binding. So you have to manually button bind with everything. 617, they had to remove CRSF-v3 because that was having baud communication issues, baud handshake issues with some FCs on Betaflight. So it's just been kind of a real mess. And then also the fact that the new receivers are 6.10 and 6.14 minimum version, causing people to have to update to these versions.
Right. There have been a huge number of problems with TBS code, and I imagine their developers are incredibly overworked. And frankly, I would guess that getting a new operating system developed by a third party running on their radios is just not their top priority.
Yeah.
And I kind of don't blame them for that.
I would say so too. Well, I think Trappy was a little burned because I don't know if they weren't following correctly, or I didn't follow the backside of it, but basically the side that we were presented was EdgeTX updated, and when they updated, they brought it to RTOS. So they moved from the other operating system to RTOS, and so TBS had to do a lot of work to then change a lot of the code work they had done to RTOS, and that was the big hiccup. So
right.
I think
that TBS basically was ready to go.
Correct. Yeah.
And then the EdgeTX devs were like, you know what? Actually, we changed a whole bunch of shit, and all your work is thrown out the window right now. Which everyone loves it when someone does that, right?
Yes, it's always popular. That's for sure. So
yeah.
So hopefully they'll get that done in the next few months. I know they've got a lot to work on, but we definitely at least wanted to get you updated on that, so you're not expecting it to come when it won't. So
yeah, it is worth saying though that this model that TBS is proposing is not typical of OpenTX radios, at least if I understand correctly. That normally what you expect is that you can download and flash whatever firmware on your radio that you want. And what TBS seems to be proposing is it's kind of like when you have a Samsung phone and Samsung builds a new version of Android for your phone, and then Samsung gives it to you, but you don't get it straight from Google. And TBS seems to be saying that they're going to build these firmwares and give them to you. You're not going to be able to get them the same way you would other stuff.
Yeah, it seemed like what they've talked about, and of course they've already had issues, so it may not work out like this, but I think the original vision was that Agent would be able to generate these, so that when there's a new version out, Agent would like work to build through Agent instead of through OpenTX Configurator or EdgeTX Configurator. It would do the sort of building through OpenTX, or I'm sorry, through Agent X, so that Agent X could format the bin for your radio properly, because it needed to have the special Crossfire specialness in it. And that's because you're using the TBS bootloader. So something I've talked about before is that you could remove the TBS bootloader and load your own firmware on the radio and use the radio, but then you have no access to the TBS bootloader or the internal module that's in the radio.
And nobody who has a Tango or Mambo wants to give up their internal module. So.
Yes. Also, there's concerns because like both those radios use gimbals that are digital, and they're using a SPI bus instead of using converters and stuff. So it's a little bit different as well. How all that stuff kind of works together. So.
All right. Well, we will keep you updated when we find out more. In the meantime, EdgeTX 2.7, I'm sure we'll have some exciting stuff that we will also cover when it comes out. All righty. Well, you know what? I said, Blunty, let's talk about a company that's not too controversial, and then I didn't, TBS is generally well liked, but sometimes controversial a little bit. I think we should try to really focus on a company that is not controversial and that everybody likes. Crap.
That's very straight across the board. Always gives you the good info. Yeah.
So Redcat has had another earnings call. That's one of the disadvantages of being a public company is that once a quarter, you have to do an earnings call where you basically lie to your investors. No, I'm sorry. I take that back. That is a bold claim that a CEO would disagree with, that you try to tell investors that everything is going great and they should keep investing in your company without lying, because that would be an SEC violation and no one would do that.
Yeah.
And you and I are going to talk about this because I think that I want to try to cut through some of the BS that I think is inherent to an earnings call.
I think starting on the last one, or maybe the one before this, we were starting to go like, hey, we're getting a different tune every time and it always sounds like a bunch of garbage. And so that's been getting worse and worse.
So by the way, there are links in the video description, in the show notes. If you can actually listen to the whole earnings call, if you would like to hear this for yourself, there's also a transcript that Blunty. Did you listen to it or did you just read the transcript?
I listened to it and pulled the transcript as well.
Wow. You're so devoted to the news.
Yeah.
I didn't listen to it. All right. Where do you want to start? Well, you've got some quotes here in the... Well, I didn't actually put the quotes in the show notes because they were really long, but let's just start with one of them.
Maybe show the show notes. So that
I can put them on screen. Yeah, I'll put them on screen. Where do you want to start?
That's probably the best way to go, because I just picked out basically everything that had to do with Fat Shark. So let's just give you a couple quotes about Fat Shark here and give you an idea where they're at. Anybody who's been listening to the show for a long time has heard a lot of these earnings calls before, and you know how they've been talking about Fat Shark, so I think you might find this interesting. Okay, so Fat Shark has new products coming. That is the first sentence that was like, oh, really?
Really? Isn't that nice?
We've been talking about for a while that, like, is the HD03 like actually coming? Like, what is happening with Fat Shark? Is Fat Shark making a new goggle? Are they even doing support anymore? So,
my expectation, based on nothing, was that Fat Sharks was going to move away from analog and double down on HD0 and SharkBite. And that was going to be because any company that is making purely analog stuff is on the decline. Not that analog is dead. It won't be dead for a long time. But when you're a company, you want to be on the upswing. If you're on the downswing, it doesn't matter how long that tail is, your days are numbered. And so I was like, okay, they're going to dive into HD0. That's going to be the future of the company. And now HD0 and Fat Shark have gone their separate ways. I don't know the behind the scenes, but is that true? Do you agree?
It seems to be the case that, basically all of that stuff has been pushed away. The only thing I think that's still in production, or seems to be in production, is that what they call a test goggle still, is the
Scout HD.
The Scout HD, which seems to be the only thing they still have like in relation to the two.
So then,
also, we haven't been 100% clear that the HD0 VRX or the SharkBite VRX is not in production anymore, but that is assumed to be the case. We don't know that for sure.
So we're like, okay, well, what do you got, Fat Shark? What do you got? You just gonna make more analog goggles? Good luck with that.
Yeah. So Fat Shark has new products coming. So people were asking and stuff, and he says, so the last quarter, to be very frank, we had a lot less Fat Shark revenue in the quarter, mostly because they're at the end of one product cycle going into a new product cycle. And when that happens, it's very similar to the iPhone. No one likes to buy iPhones in August when the new iPhone's coming out in September. So we expect the revenue to come back up in that phase. Now, for anybody who like knows Fat Shark, like that's hot garbage. That's not real.
I read that paragraph, and that was where my I'm selling a line to investors bullshit detector went off. Because, like, the end of a product cycle, well, first of all, analog is not really the end of a product cycle. Analog is, I'm not seeing numbers from behind the industry, so I could be wrong, but my take is that analog is in a slow decline. So like 2 years ago when DJI came out, a whole bunch of people went to DJI and ditched analog entirely. And so there was like when DJI FPV came out, there was a big dip, my guess is, and now we're on a sort of a slow trickling decline, but it's not the end of a life cycle. And then if that was the end of a life cycle, HC0 and Sharkbite would have been the beginning of the next life cycle, and Fat Shark was like, this is our new product. Actually, we think that guy stinks and we don't want to do business with him. Bye. Which was a voluntary, like, that's different than, hey, we're just coming out with a new version of the iPhone.
Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't track. Like, the words don't track to reality. Like, if you look at, like, no one likes to buy iPhones in August when the new iPhone is coming out in September. That is suggesting that someone is not buying a Fat Shark product because they're expecting the new Fat Shark product to be about to drop. H2O2 dropped in 2019. That's not a thing. That's not real. That's what I'm saying.
The product.
Waiting on
what product are they waiting on, Blunty? It's the HC0 goggles.
Yeah, that Fat Shark is not making.
That Fat Shark is not involved with.
Yeah, we have no reason to believe Fat Shark is in any way involved with anymore. So it really just sounds like totally out of touch. Like, hey, this is something people on this call will buy. You know?
Yep.
So let's continue. As Jeff noted, Fat Shark is, unfortunately, in a sense, I mean, of course, he's stumbling over words here. Let's say how short bursts here. As Jeff noted, Fat Shark is, unfortunately, in a sense, I mean, of course, we're going to come out with better technology. But they are kind of caught on the downside of their most popular product's life cycle.
That is true.
That's an accurate statement.
That is an accurate statement.
Yes.
The implication is that they've got something coming, and I don't think they have something coming. I mean, because HC0 is, look at HC, if they haven't been working, Fat Shark hasn't been working for the last 6 years on the successor to analog video. Carl has been working for God knows how long on HD0. And HD0, in my opinion, was what was going to pull Fat Shark out of the fire. Because Fat Shark has never been a technology innovator in the way that HD0 is. Creating a new silicon, a new product. Fat Shark has been very good at certain aspects of what they do. They're very good at like industrial design or whatever you want to call making the goggles. They're very good at sourcing components and building a business around putting those components together. They're very good at QC and manufacturing. I will absolutely give them that. And historically, they have been very good at customer service, although I feel like that is slipping lately. Those are the things they're good at. But none of that will allow them to thrive in a world where analog is dying and DJI is the alternative, because you can't put DJI into a Fat Shark goggle. So what are they going to develop? If they start developing the next HD0, I'll see you in 5 years or 10 years when you've finished and it's too late. You missed the boat.
Yeah. I don't, it's hard to know what they're actually talking about here or what they will do. Like, I'm expecting to see an HD03 that's out of touch, but still gives them revenue so they can put on the books revenue and satisfy investors. Like, that's where my head's at.
That's actually a really good, that's interesting. That's a good guess. They need revenue. But what is the HDO3 going to...
Somebody will buy it.
What is it going to have that the HDO2 doesn't? Because the HDO2 is state-of-the-art right now in terms of OLED screen, yada, yada, yada.
What optics, like, where are they getting the optics engines from? Like, I don't know. I don't know what you could solve there.
Yeah.
Let's read the rest of these real quick.
Okay.
So he says, and now we got a little bit about Rotor Riot. He says, and actually, Rotor Riot had its best quarter since we acquired the company and almost reached break even this quarter. So Rotor Riot was a real surprise for us. We don't look at that subsidiary as really capturing the market's attention, but it's really a good marketing visibility platform for us. And he says, as Joseph mentioned, Rotor Riot has been doing great. They are growing. They've got some great things they've been doing, but even at just break even, it's a great asset for us because they launch products. People go to Rotor Riot to sponsor episodes. Our biggest competitor is in the Chinese drone market is DJI, and they sponsored many, many episodes on Rotor Riot to launch their product. So we think it's a very, very valuable company because of its marketing power to the early adopters in the drone industry, which are typically working in the drone industry as commercial operators. I thought that was an interesting way they're pitching Rotor Riot. It's basically a platform, a vessel for them to break even and then use it as a platform to develop more like kind of relationships with people and kind of be in the pockets of people who might otherwise be competitors.
It is, and that is accurate. DJI has sponsored many Rotor Riot episodes for the DJI FPV system. It was very surprising to me to hear that Rotor Riot just reached break even, and this is one of those situations where people think, oh, well, I'm friends with Drew, and I am a Rotor Riot pilot, so I must have some behind the scenes information. But I stay out of that stuff. I try to stay out of the business side, and I just show up and shoot episodes, which I kind of don't do that anymore either lately, but be that as it may. But I assume that the Rotor Riot store is profitable, and that's where the money comes from to fly pilots around and make episodes. Like otherwise, now recently Redcat had their public offering. They raised like $60 million plus, and I was like, oh well, okay, Rotor Riot's probably seeing a chunk of that. But before then, I don't know where Rotor Riot was getting money to make episodes if they weren't profitable on their store. That's the whole, and so I'm really surprised about that.
How I read this is a like. Basically, we're making enough money from the store to fund the videos, and then maybe carrying some debt every year. And then Redcat bought in with debt. Mm-hmm. And now they're like, finally, with everything they're doing and the way they've structured and who's purchasing what and where they've done cuts on videos and how they're spending money, they've been able to do a break even so that the money they're bringing in from the store is paying for all the products, all the employees, all the warehouse, all the static employees, all the management.
I'm just shocked that wasn't happening already. Part. I'm shocked that wasn't happening already.
To me, I bet the video part is a big part of it. And as a company, you're looking at building the value of the brand of Rotor Riot by spending money into the video portion and getting sponsorships and building relationships.
Yeah.
Like that's where my head would go with that. It's like, just like any other company, it's like Redcat is like not worried about profit. They're worried about revenue. I think it maybe could be similar for a Rotor Riot as long as you have a source of money or a way to
But I don't think they did.
Debt.
I don't have the impression that they did. Other than the store. I mean, way back when Rotor Riot was owned by Lauren International, years and years ago, Lauren International was a big company that was involved with flight test. I don't know the exact history. I believe I don't know that. But when Rotor Riot was formed out of flight test by Chad Kapper and was originally supported by Lauren International, in those first few, however many months or year, I don't know the time frame, where Rotor Riot first came out and it seemed like they were going to Hawaii and they had all this money to make episodes. That was Lauren International injecting cash. And then Kapper took Rotor Riot away from Lauren International and the cash flow was restricted and then the tone of the episodes and the expense of the episodes changed. And yeah. A GoPro just turned off somewhere in my room. Cool. So anyway, I don't have the impression that they had a fountain of cash. But I don't know, like I said at the beginning.
I don't necessarily mean a fountain of cash, but as a company, if you build revenue and you prove to either private investors or a bank that you have a way to have value, you can accrue money for debt.
You could just get loans.
You take your equity that you have.
Valid.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's interesting to know that Rotor Riot wasn't breaking even in some sense of the word, and now they are.
It's from this statement, it does seem that way.
It's also interesting the attitude that they seem to be like, this Rotor Riot company, nobody really cares about them in the real drone world, but it's good that they're here. Aren't they cute? Pet them on the head.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's finish this up. We got a little bit more about Fat Shark, and I think it kind of wraps everything up a little bit. So Fat Shark is it's the leader in the goggle space for FPV.
Is it though? Is it though?
If anybody, he says, if anyone saw the Drone Racing League recently on TV, all those pilots are using Fat Shark goggles. And as Joseph mentioned, we're right at the end of their last product cycle, going into this brand new product cycle, which you'll be hearing more about as soon, with some really exciting stuff coming. So that's kind of, these two companies are grouped together and on the consumer side. So this was a question somebody was asking, can you summarize the consumer and commercial parts of your company and how they fit together? And so before, we've talked about how they've talked about the digital system, and this was literally like 3 months ago, I think we were talking about this. They were talking about the digital system as part of their platform. They were talking about Fat Shark working with Skypersonic on the commercial side. They were talking about it's possible that revenues would be split so that half of Fat Shark would be commercial, or half Fat Shark would be consumer and half would be commercial, doing skypersonic work, selling goggles and things to them. And now, 3 months later, we have what seems to be a total flip, and them saying it's Fat Shark and Rotor Riot make up our consumer side, and that's where we see them. Yeah, I don't know. That's definitely an interesting, but I would say kind of shift. So.
Yeah. This new product life cycle only is valid if you have a new product that you have been developing that is about to release, and I just don't think Fat Shark has that. I'd love to be wrong.
This would presume to say either next quarter or the quarter after they will be dropping a product. So 3 to 6 months, like this.
And it's not just going to be another analog goggle.
Or if it is, it's like, to me, this could totally be another analog goggle. This could be spin on the same fucking thing they've done before. But the question is, can the H2O3 come into a place where you can compete? Because that's the question, is like you said, what are they going to bring in, and what's going to compete, and what's going to be worth having over possibly by then an HD0 goggle who has a great integration, presumably. Yep. By then, maybe a new SkyZone goggle, or at least the SkyZone goggle we have already being good and possibly cheaper.
Who knows what Orca might do or might not do.
Yeah, and you have all these used H2O2s and stuff, which honestly, again, like, what are you going to do better than the H2O2? You're probably going to use a similar optical engine. You'll probably use a similar screen. Yeah, there's a lot of questions there. So.
Yeah, this I got to wonder if Fat Shark is wondering if they just should have like rode that horse off into the sunset, kept selling analog goggles, and now they got Jeff Thompson kicking their ass saying, make money, make products. They actually have to fucking work.
Here's what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to guess the large part of how they sold to Redcat was because of HD0. I don't know that that's true, but that's my gut. Is that a lot of what Redcat saw was them using HD0 and focusing that technology on their system.
Of course, that makes so much sense.
Right, and they were calling it Sharkbite at the time, and it was a very much like a Fat Shark system and like all that kind of stuff. So if you're pitching to someone who's trying to buy your company, you're going to pitch it like that. And to me, like, if you're these people who are talking in this conversation we've been reading, you're going to buy the shit out of the fact that people are selling you on some fancy digital system that doesn't make any sense. So I don't know. That's the impression I get.
All right. Well, it's fascinating. But we're going to move on because we're going to run out of time if we just keep chattering about. It's so fascinating, though. We got an update here. We haven't talked about the multi-rotor on Mars yet in a while. And like many Mars rovers these days, its mission has gone on and on and on and on, way longer than anybody expected. What's the update, Blunty?
It was literally going so well that we stopped talking about it because we're like, yep, this thing's been flying on Mars over and over again, and it's at this point it's actually routine. They're doing so good. So so I wanted to highlight Flight 20. We're actually on Flight 22. So this is the last highlighted flight, and has some interesting information in it. So this is the first flight that's ever been delayed on anywhere off of Earth for weather. So they had an inclement weather delay for this. But what was interesting is the inclement weather was a dust storm. So they had to figure out what the heck to do because they were in a dust storm. So they fired the drone, the thing back up, and they looked at the cameras on the bottom, and they realized that it was covered in dust, and the whole ring around the outside had a bunch of dust specks on it. And if they tried to fly it, it would think it was the ground and miss correct. So they basically had to develop a system to upload a new mask for the image, and they masked over all the dust so that it wouldn't detect the dust as the ground. And then it also turned out the servos were clogged full of dust. And so they did this process they never actually tested, where they shook the servos a bunch. They basically jiggled the servos really hard, and they were able to jiggle the servos enough to actually clear the dirt out. So that all worked, and they were able to do Flight 20, and then after that, Flight 21 and Flight 22. If you check the show notes, we've actually got a little bit of video from Flight 22 and 21. As much video as you can get from Mars. So Flight 22 is a little bit, just a little bit of a slideshow there, and Flight 21 is a little better.
Okay, let's see here. I can't tell which flight I'm on.
Yeah, so you can kind of see a better idea of them flying across there.
Yeah, there we go. That's the downward-facing camera, I guess, tracking the ground.
That's how it tracks and knows where it's going to. So it negotiates how to land and stuff. Pretty cool. Some more footage from Mars, and this thing is still going almost a year after it originally landed on Mars.
I wish I could get a quadcopter to last a whole year.
I know, man. They're really going there. It's crazy.
Got up on Mars. Alrighty. Next up, we've got the drone cinematic of the... No, we don't. The FAA Drone Symposium event.
Yeah, so if anybody is interested in this, I'm sure this will be a very limited amount of people, but we did want to let people know so they are aware. The FAA is having a drone symposium where they're going to talk about things like the BVLOS ARC report that we talked about last week, remote ID requirements. They're going to talk about that and have discussions about UAS traffic management and some more regulations that they're doing. So if you're interested in that, that symposium is April 28th in Orlando. It does cost like $400, but presumably you would be going to this because you have a reason.
I can pay $400 to be ignored by the FAA.
That's true. Yes.
Sounds
you
like
can
a
watch
real...
the FAA ignore things in real time.
Oh man.
In person.
I don't know why. Okay, cool. I don't know why I would go to this. I'm sure that there are people for whom there's value, but we're going to talk about BVLOS, really? Because the ARC made recommendations. Can you just listen to them? No? I'm going to guess. Anyway. All right. Well, if you feel like going to that, and we will certainly talk more about anything that comes out of that that's relevant, if there is any.
Yeah.
Next up, the drone cinematic of the week. Blunty, you started doing this like 2 or 3 weeks ago, finding a new cinematic. What made you want to do this?
I don't know. I just saw a bunch of cool clips going around and thought we should start showing some because, otherwise we typically don't show clips of actual drones flying a lot that people fly. So
yeah,
it
all
might be
right.
cool to find a place to put that in the show. So that's kind of where this and the next segment really came from. So
what do you got for us this week? Let me see if I can reload this page and restart it.
Yeah, so we've got just a cool fly through of a concert. So we've got a concert.
Cool.
This live DJ set going on, and it's pretty neat. I bet this is a pretty hard flying environment. I've seen some different shots like this, but definitely not easy to fly with lasers and smoke everywhere.
Yeah, I'd love to see the pilot feed. I assume it's a Cinewhoop, right?
Yeah, almost. It's got to be ducted quad.
Woo! I know Evan Turner got to do some of this stuff in Vegas a little while back. I think this is just more and more common, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that it's more and more of that stuff is happening for sure.
So cool.
So I want to say right here, if you guys have something to submit for the drone cinematic of the week, please send it in to news@fpvknowitall.com so we can throw it up on the news. It could be sponsored here as well.
All right.
So.
Well, thanks for finding that, Blunty. That's pretty cool. Just seeing what is up with drones. And there's another way that drones are being used more and more these days, and that is in sports. What are you bringing attention to this time?
Well, so I think we've looked at a sports thing probably every week for the last few weeks, and I figured we'd look at another one. So we've got some racing here, and I thought this is another example of pretty good coverage where, this is like 9 hours of footage, and they've just got multiple drone pilots out here, constantly chasing different cars and swapping in and out and spitting live feeds to the
I can't imagine
announcers.
What kind of crew is doing 9 hours of this, whether it's the same pilot. Let's get some drone footage. Where you got a timestamp for drone footage, or we just got to sort of dig
you could
through
have to I just randomly do about 126 somewhere in there. But yeah, there's a lot of just different random shots where they pop to them when they're chasing and stuff. So
there we go. Oh, that's interesting. Is that DJI? No, there's no watermark. It must be a proprietary system. I saw a little bit of blocking there. It made me think it was DJI. Hell yes. Hell yes. I don't think it's DJI. I don't know. I could be wrong.
But yeah, super cool that we're just seeing more and more of this stuff. You can get great shots, and they were even talking about. I saw they were talking a lot more about how the cars or how the trucks and stuff go across the ground and how their suspension works and stuff while the drones are flying next to them. Just stuff you maybe wouldn't get commentary from otherwise, or and stuff. I think it definitely evokes a different kind of attitude from both people watching it and I think the commentators who get to see those feeds and comment on them. So.
And anytime you are normalizing drone shots, you're expanding what professional people think of as possible. Like if you think about it, if you go back far enough, Steadicam wasn't a thing. Someone invented a Steadicam, and then it was possible to do these long shots with a handheld camera in a way that you couldn't before. And there probably was a window where the directors of photography, the directors, all these people who make the decisions about what shots are going to be put into a film, didn't really know to think about Steadicams. And then it became a thing, and people just, now it's just a tool in your toolbox, is Steadicams. And I'm really enjoying seeing drones go through that, because now when you're doing a live sporting event, snowboarding, mountain biking, cars, whatever, more and more directors are able to say, hey, can we get drone shots? Because like you look at a shot like this, that's, oh my God, I could not have cut in at a better time. Like, look at this shot. Yeah. Oh, this is better. And more people
is better.
Need to know this exists.
And the more this happens, the more they'll be able to like cut down on where they do have to put cameras up, and cost of like setting up areas, and like, because it'll all be, more can be remote, or these corners can be covered, or like, yeah. I think there's a lot of cases where stuff will start to form around that.
It's pretty exciting. All right.
Yeah.
Alrighty, well, we got just one more little thing to do, Blunty, and that is a rant. I have a rant today. I brought the rant today. Yeah. And my rant, you were like, what is there to rant about? About Throttle Expo. Oh, sir. My rant goes back to this video from Chris Rosser. And he gives some tips about rates and flight feel. And of course, the video is amazing in every way. But I disagree with him because he is telling people that, and I've got a comment here if people want to go check out the video and read my comment. But he's telling people to use Throttle Expo. He's saying it's overlooked. No one uses it. Everyone should use it. And I disagree. Do you want to tell the people what Throttle Expo is?
Sure. Yeah, the idea of Throttle Expo is that you basically set a midpoint on the throttle. So you find a place in the throttle, whether it's 50% or 40% or 30%, wherever your spot is. And then you build expo, which most people know expo from the other moves, but expo is basically adding in an exponential value so that you have more room around the spot that you pick, essentially. So like if I set my expo to 0.5, or my midpoint to 0.5, and then I add expo, I'm going to increase the resolution around 0.5, but I'm going to lower the resolution at the top and the bottom. So when I come up on the throttle, it's going to come up faster, but then I'm going to hit this midpoint, where I'm going to have this open area where it's a little, it's like high resolution, there's plenty of room to move in there, I'm not changing a lot of thrust or throttle. And then suddenly I'm going to get to the top, and I'm going to move a lot more throttle up to the top, depending on where you put that midpoint.
So you're giving up precision in one part of the stick travel to gain precision in another part of the stick travel. And so here are the reasons that here's the story of how I came to use linear throttle and eschew Throttle Expo. When I was first learning to fly, I struggled with altitude management, as many people do. I struggled with throttle control. And I used Throttle Expo to make it easier to hover and cruise. And I noticed that I was very bad at making sharp turns. And the reason for that is that when you go into a sharp turn, you have to be at a much higher throttle position than if you're just sort of cruising, because you bank over tightly. And as I was raising the throttle to go into that sharp turn, I was leaving the sort of soft spot of the throttle and entering the imprecise spot and making it very hard for me to turn. And I came to the conclusion, so that's number one. Number two is that as a quadcopter's weight changes, the hover position, the cruise position changes. So if you set the Throttle Expo for one position, then it's going to be not correct when you sort of use a heavier battery or add or remove a GoPro. And then number three is that all of my different quads had a different hover position on the throttle, whether, a tiny whoop, a 5-inch, a beast class. And I found that it was just too much of a hassle to set up the Throttle Expo on every single one of them, especially when the midpoint would change as the weight changed. And so what I came to the conclusion was that the right thing to do was to just use a linear throttle and learn to find the throttle point and learn to control the throttle. And I that has worked for me. And when I see people saying you must use Throttle Expo, I feel like you're steering, this is sort of the ranty part, I feel like you're steering people down a path where you're not telling them the downsides. That's the thing. He's just saying, use Throttle Expo, it's amazing. And it's like, hold on, there are downsides here that people need to know about.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I think it depends on what your goal is. A lot of people in chat are mentioning cinematic flight or cinematic quads, and I think for those, it can be much more important because you know where you're going to be the entire time. Like you're in level flight typically with the cinematic quad, or you know how you're going to be flying. I think it's very much easier to set Throttle Expo on something like that because you know like the range of it and you know the tilt, and you're not going to be that far tilted, or you're going to be at a certain tilt for the camera. And that's like a goal, right? So like if you're doing a shot to me, right, and you have a Cineloop and your best tilt is 15 degrees or whatever, like then you can set Throttle Expo and throttle mid for 15 degrees so that you have your hover point set and you have a nice resolution spot, because you're always going to be tilted about 15 degrees to get your shot. That's something in your head. That's a goal you're having. You're not doing acro and flips everywhere. But I think I get the idea that as you move more expo and as you move farther away from doing just these level flight, always the same angle things, you're going to have situations where, oh, if I'm tilted really far down, or if I'm cutting a corner, or if I'm doing a flip, or if I'm doing this or that, the effect of that Throttle Expo is going to be different because I'm going to want the resolution in a different spot based on the place my quad is in. However, what I'll say is I think there is a decent point here, which is one thing he brings up, which we've looked at curves before, right? Motor response curves. And sometimes motor response curves have sort of like a big, like a whoop through them. They're not like a linear curve. So I think part of what his decision was is if you do a small amount of Throttle Expo and don't really worry about midpoint, maybe you could kind of fix that curve. Now also thrust linear, right? There's other things to try to fix this as well.
Yeah, so. Thrust linear has its own problems, but I think that there's two more things I'll say about this that actually kind of temper this a little bit. If you are concerned about being able to hover as a beginner, I would recommend that you use throttle scale and just make your quad less powerful. I do that with tiny whoops sometimes. If I'm flying a tiny whoop, especially if I'm flying in angle mode, like I'll seldom be above like 75 or 80% throttle, and I'll just take a throttle scale. I actually have it set up in my controller so I can just flip a switch and do it. And I'll take it down to 80% throttle, and then I'll just fly it, and it'll be easier to manage. But the counter argument to that is that I still want a soft hover position, but I still want full power if I need to do a big punch out. Throttle Expo does give you that. The other argument that, and I think this comment sums it up best, if I was going to support Throttle Expo, what I would say is use just enough expo that you barely even notice the curve. Like if you were to lop off the bottom and top 5% of the throttle, then I probably would never notice. Because like he says, no one cares about the difference between 97% throttle and 100% throttle. So if you're very gentle with the expo, you can stretch it and give yourself a little more control around the hover position. But I just remember my experience of trying to use it. Maybe I overdid it, and it made it unpredictable and hard to fly. And I didn't like it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. So, yeah, you need precision. My argument is that you need precision throughout your throttle range. If you cruise at 45% throttle, you need precision there to maintain your cruise altitude. But if you're doing sharp slaloms, you may need precision at 75%. You can't just, unless, like you said, Blunty, you're doing very limited maneuvers, you can't just pick one throttle position and assume that that's where you need all your control. That's my take.
Also, like I still fly forest batteries on 6S motors because I don't even care about the top end. Like I don't even care to find it. So like I just learn to fly around it and don't get into a situation where I can't save myself. And I find it's a lot of fun and I love the resolution. So
all right.
Yeah, just fly what you like.
Obviously fly what you like. And Chris Rosser is a smart man who gives good advice, but you can still disagree with people. And despite the fact that we called this a rant, there's no beef. So nobody worry about that. All righty. Let me get the super chats, Blunty. We got a couple super chats that have come in. I'm just going to read those real quick. Mike Speedy FPV, thanks for £5. Remy Tim, thanks for $2. Is buying DJI goggles a now or never thing? If you're super concerned about the root exploit, then maybe pick them up today before they start shipping it with the 015 firmware stock. But I would guess that you've got at least like 4 months at a minimum before you start seeing the 015 stock. I mean, how big is their pipeline? I don't know. If you're not concerned about the root exploit, then who cares? Just wait, just do it. It doesn't matter. Otis, thank you for a $10 super chat. Why haven't we been hearing much about new goggles? Seems like 8 months ago, everyone was releasing a goggle left and right. Now it's just Orca. SkyZone was killing it. I mean, SkyZone is still killing it. The Skyo 4X is an excellent, excellent goggle. I think we have in some ways reached the sort of pinnacle of analog goggles, and there isn't as much of a point in making them better.
So I think it's going to be a cost thing. I think this is where we're going to run into who wants to pay $1,000 for goggles.
Right.
Because when you go up, there are better panels. Like Copen makes 4K panels. So you could go to a Copen 4K panel.
Why?
And you could go
Why?
To
when your feed is 720p.
Yeah. Yes, but I know somebody the guy who sent me my goggles actually, he's actually working on his own set of goggles. He's custom making them. He's doing all the 3D printing, but they're not cheap. He had to buy the panels, and then he's also trying to use an optical engine from a set of SkyZones and stuff, and like building it based off that and stuff. So there's just a lot of work you have to do, and like you said, I think we're kind of at the pinnacle. Like you have a great optical engine. Most people use that Chinese optical engine. I don't think Orca did, but I think most people do. And then most people are using the similar screen size and similar panel sources. And yeah, I don't know what we're going to see soon. So
yeah, yep. What we really need to see is more development in budget goggles in the $300 to $350 price range. That's where there's room for, but especially given how things are in the world today, I think that the prices are only going up and not down. And so, yeah.
So another great point by Dwayne, if I could get 4K feed with 4K goggles, I'd pay $1,000. So that's the other problem is nobody's sending you a feed that's good enough to warrant much better panels too. So
yeah, yep. Sarge FPV, thanks for a $5 super chat. When do you think we'll see another HD0 receiver? That is very difficult to predict. HD0 is working on them, but like, for example, right now, some parts of China are shut down due to COVID. There was a delay in the Freestyle VTX due to COVID lockdowns. I don't think anybody could really predict a time frame at this point, but they are working on it, and they know you want them.
I'll just say as soon as possible, they will be out for sale. I can guarantee that.
Yeah.
So.
Virgin FPV, thanks for €2. Virgin FPV wants us to check out his throttle modification. I'm not interested right this second in just showing random stuff to the live stream. I appreciate your super chat, but I think I'm gonna pass on that. Appreciate it. You can DM it to me and I'll look at it. But Ian Beatty, thank you for a $5 super chat. Thanks for getting the info out about the ExpressLRS Zorro working with the XJT, since I heard a few local guys asking about doing that. Yeah, EdgeTX 2.7 will have that. Coelho FPV, thanks for $5. Good show. Thank you. Thank you, Coelho, for the donation. Bambi, thanks for £5. Sorry about your mom, Bandy. That was rough, but hope you're doing well. What about Throttle Expo, the Disney movie?
Oh,
Too deadpan.
gotcha.
Too deadpan. I missed it.
I didn't know if you knew something I didn't know. So there was no way for
Bambi,
me
the deer in the Disney movie, got shot by a hunter. It's too deadpan. It went right over everybody's head. What about Throttle Expo in racing when you generally need the most resolution at 90 to 100% throttle? Valid. I mean, if you spend the majority of your time at one throttle position, maybe Throttle Expo at that position will work. Like, for example, Blunty, 3S, Freedom Spec Racing. Those guys are at 100% throttle all the time.
Yeah, but I'm going to say that's going to be, I don't know. I mean, it probably will help, but I bet it will get weird because of VBAT sag. Because you're sagging so much with racing that, I don't know how much benefit you'll get because you have so much sag and so much variance there. So
yeah,
it might be worth trying, though. I mean, if you're a racer, I definitely think you should run some packs with that.
Yeah,
I don't think
it's
that's
worth
a bad
a try.
idea.
Worth a try.
See how weird it feels. So.
Yeah. And then Squirrely, thanks for $2. I appreciate how honest and fair we are. Oh, well, I know there's definitely some manufacturers who think we're a little bit negative some of the time, but glad you think we're honest and fair. Alrighty. That is what's next, Blunty. We're almost done.
Yeah, we're almost done. We just got to do plugs. We're gonna do a little plug section. I figured
Yeah.
that's probably a good idea.
We're going
to
to
let
plug
people know where to
you.
find
We don't
us.
need to plug me.
Okay, well,
Everybody
that's
knows
fine.
who I am.
So I figure I just made a little central website, so it's a little easier to find me if you want to find my Discord and my Patreon. That's always helpful to sign up for the Patreon.
It's
And troubleshooting is
blunty.com.
right there if you need to do some troubleshooting. So
You have a Discord? Am I on your Discord?
I do have a Discord.
I'm not on your Discord. Well, damn, I got to join your Discord. I'm doing it right now.
Yes, now you are. So.
Yeah. So if you want to, Blunty does one-on-one calls. And frankly, he is just as smart or smarter than me. So everybody's like, hey, Bardwell, what does it take to get on the phone with you? And I'm like, man, I'm busy. It's going to be expensive. And then, but I'm always like, you should try Blunty. He's pretty good. And you're way cheaper than me and just as smart and will help people solve their problem. Not quite as good looking, but,
Well,
but they should totally,
they should totally,
yeah, you'll get on the phone. You'll do remote desktop support.
Yeah, we'll get it figured out. If it's possible to do it remotely, we'll figure it out for you.
Yeah. Alrighty. So, yeah, little plug there at the end. Thank you guys for being here.
Yeah, also don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Always helpful. Give a thumbs up down there. Do all the interaction things. Anything you could do to promote us. Tell your friends about the FPV news. That's always helpful. Maybe some people don't know about it. And yeah, we appreciate you being here, as always.
Alrighty. That's going to do it, folks. We'll see you next week and throughout the week. Thanks again, Blunty. Have a great night, everybody.
Thanks. Take it easy, guys.
Awesome.